Every day, we hear of more and more people that are falling below the poverty line. However, at the very same time, we constantly hear about the global elite, including individuals such as Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos that are adding billions to their wealth seemingly every year. The question is, why such a great difference? Do these ultra-wealthy individuals know something that the rest of us don't? Or are they just too smart for the system that keeps the rest of us down? Welcome back to Facts Fanatics. Today, we'll attempt to answer one of the most important questions of the modern age. Why are there rich and poor people in the world? Why doesn't everyone get the same opportunity? We'll discuss why only people who only fully understand the system can get rich. Let's get into it. Before we get too deep, we need to identify exactly what the system is. The system refers to the interconnected economic, political, and social institutions of the world that define how we live. These structures are intended to keep things as they are, and they often serve the interests of the powerful while ignoring the needs of the common man. The wealth gap is one such issue. The top 1% of the world's population now controls more money than the bottom 5 billion people put together. The system permits the rich to amass more riches and influence, while the poor have a harder time getting ahead. Let's look into some of the reasons that the economy is designed to keep us poor. The credit score system, for one, is a nightmare and one of the most frustrating parts of the financial system. The most frustrating aspect of a credit score is that there just doesn't appear to be any way to reliably improve it. Need more debt? Unfortunately, the grade was terrible. Do you have a history of being chronically late in paying any of your bills? Bam! Have you thought about looking at your score? Pow! It remains extremely easy to ruin your credit score and extremely difficult to improve it. This seems counterintuitive at first glance. A high credit score can only be achieved by A. Consistently carrying a large amount of debt, and B. Making timely payments towards that debt. You would be correct in thinking that this is a hopeless game. In what strange economy can it make sense to take on debts that you will never be able to repay? Credit scores are a telltale sign that the current economic system epitomizes Marx's concept of immiseration. For most people to be able to afford even the most basic necessities, they have to be deeply in debt and stuck in a job that they despise. If you don't comply, your other option is to be abandoned to a miserable fate. Just consider that reality for a moment. It takes the typical person their entire working life to pay off their home's mortgage. Thus, it takes a lifetime of work to get out of the burden of housing debt. Do you find that to be logically sound or an indication of a healthy and fair economy? Why is it that even in the wealthiest countries, many still can't afford to buy their own homes? Aren't those who don't even have a place to call home or a small plot of land to call their own serfs, or more to the point, shouldn't they be? Really, our economies are meant to function like this. What Marx called a cycle of capital occurs periodically. Banks, hedge funds, and other financial institutions lend obscene amounts to people so they can afford the bare minimum. Not high-end fashion or expensive cars. Everything from healthcare to retirement savings to college tuition to rent is being paid for using some combination of credit and store-bought cash. They also charge exorbitant fees for the opportunity. Capital thus circulates as follows: from the bank to you and then back to the bank, with you essentially achieving no forward progress, while the banks and hedge funds grow immensely wealthy from the exorbitant interest you pay them to keep you indebted forever. But why are people always in so much debt? The correct response is as straightforward and damning as it appears. Considering how low salaries are, you'll always be struggling to make ends meet. Having a place to call your own, free from the threat of foreclosure from your bank, is a huge, unusual, and essentially unheard of luxury, even in the world's wealthiest nations. Almost no one owns their home in the traditional sense, with the possible exception of citizens of countries like Germany. A place to call home, though, is essential. These days, there are essentially two types of economies in the world. First, the real proprietors of capital, individuals who have no mortgage, car payments, or other significant recurring expenses. And the rest of us, a vast underclass of neo-serfs who will always be indebted to the upper crust. Indeed, the first group of owners is minuscule in comparison to the other 90%, but they are still a significant minority. It's people with truly enormous fortunes like Bezos and Zuck, and possibly their senior lieutenants. As a result of their wealth, they could purchase entire municipalities, if not countries. Meanwhile, the typical person who claims, "I'm going to die before I pay off all these obligations," really acquires nothing throughout the course of their life. On paper, it's hard to believe so many do something so dumb and infuriating. Several economic theorists and journalists praise the current economies of the West as the biggest wealth generation engines ever. But in cold socio-political terms, despite the fact that people now have more conveniences, they remain the same, a class of working men and women who have been dispossessed because they won't be able to buy a decent place of their own, because capital won't help them earn more money. When seen in this light, it becomes clear that there is a serious problem with our economies. A person shouldn't have to work for decades just to be able to afford housing, utilities, education, and healthcare. Just as absurd as it seems, that's not really living at all. There are huge groups of people in our societies who have been forced to become wage slaves. To put it bluntly, they are entirely restricted. In order to afford medical coverage, to pay down their mortgage, their bills, or any other type of owed money, they have no choice but to accept this position. Most of the time, we don't even give that much consideration before taking it. The truth, however, is that it results in a tremendous waste of human potential. Instead of curing illness, exploring space, writing that great novel, or solving that new equation, you become some middle manager enforcing someone else's debt. A society and economy that reduces people to wage slaves whose main focus in life is to pay off debts incurred to provide for their fundamental needs is a miserable failure. The idea that you're stuck in some bad job rather than having the freedom to do something far more worthwhile with your life, which might confer some massive benefit on us all, is really the starting point for the idea that our markets are still ruled by wage slavery, and it minimizes human potential. Rising salaries are essential if people are to break free of the crushing debt that defines daily living in almost every nation today. In reality, though, it's a joke, despite being nice and necessary. Little is being done to address the fundamental issue that middle-class people cannot provide for their basic needs, such as housing, education, retirement, or utilities. Thus, average salaries need to drastically increase, or fascism will continue to sweep our countries, sparking old hatred out of desperation and lack of opportunity. There's a straightforward explanation for why both major political parties in the United States of America endorse a broken social compact. For them, it's a win-win situation. They get massive sums of money from the world's wealthiest individuals, companies, and institutions. There's truly just one reason for spending so much cash. The goal is to keep you mired in debt forever, to trap you in what Karl Marx called the cycle of capital, which in practical terms means you never earn enough to pay off your obligations to the point where home ownership is a distant dream. Any society where its citizens must work their entire lives to provide their most fundamental needs, food, clothing, shelter, medical care, and retirement security, is doomed to fail. Like the United States, they will inevitably become mired in the bottomless pit of fascism and the accompanying stupidity, hatred, greed, resentment, violence, and brutality. No one should have to endure that kind of life. Essentially, it's from the Middle Ages. Even if you own a flat-screen television and a PlayStation, that doesn't mean you aren't a peasant and don't act like one. Those folks tend to take their frustrations out on the most helpless members of society because that's all they can do to change the world. In many circumstances, people's economic situations will remain unchanged because the system is set up to preserve the status quo. Poverty results from a combination of factors, including limited access to resources like education and employment, poor income, and uncertain access to credit, regressive taxes, a lack of affordable housing options, and racial, gender, and sexual orientation-based discrimination are all ways in which the system contributes to these problems. Thanks for watching. What do you think? What is the most frustrating part of this system to you? What shifts do you think need to happen in policy to reverse the status quo? Be sure to let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos just like this one.